Kang, I appreciate your. People say stuff like, it's not good enough, it's unacceptable, but they won't go so far as to say they should fire him, which says you don't really believe that. You would move on from Derek Lalonde if they missed the playoffs. So I give you credit for that. Gator, would you move on from Derek Lalonde if they miss the playoffs? Let's say if they finish with 89 points, they go from 74 to 80 to 89.
I wouldn't fire him, but I would agree that that seat warmer is turned on. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also turned on for Steve Yzerman because he's the guy that has put this together with this roster. And for as much as I was praising it earlier, you and I have both praised it earlier, bringing the adults in the room and all that, it's starting to kind of backfire a little bit because those guys aren't carrying the load enough. And then
making sure you're clear here, you're not saying we were being the adults in the room. You were saying Yzerman got adults.
Yeah, he got adults in the room. Yeah.
Okay.
But then you just look at some of these contracts that they've got on defense. I think Ben Sherratt's a really good defenseman. I don't have a problem with what he's getting paid, which is $4.75. But Justin Hall, who's playing half the games, is making $3.4, and he'll do that next year and the year after. Ole Mata is getting paid $3 million for next year. Jeff Petrie is not getting paid as much as people maybe think he is, because I know people are really down on Petrie, and I get it, and he's making $2.3 million a year. But you're going to have to pay Seider. You're going to have to pay Lucas Raymond because they're restricted free agents. Those guys are going to count for some decent money, probably $6 million a season on contracts. And when you look at what they're going to have to spend in the offseason, I think they're going to have at least $20 million to spend in the offseason, but a big portion is going to come up with just those two players, re-signing them. And as much as I want to go out and make a big splash in free agency, how do you do it? How do you do it? Unless you're able to find somebody to take on somebody else's contract. Andrew Kopp is making $5.6 million a year for the next 3 years. JT Compher's making $5.1 million a year for the next 4 seasons. Robbie Fabry's making $4 million next year. I mean, so these are some longer term deals. It's like, oh.
Let me tell you why if they miss the playoffs, but finish with not a small, not 81 points, but if they get to push 90 points here, which again, 74 to 80 to 89, let's say 88, 89, why I'm not in the fire Lalonde or Yzerman camp. And it's for the following reason. They have gotten killed in the draft lottery. And no team has fallen more in this playoff drought era for the Red Wings than the Red Wings have in the draft lottery. So, and I'm not saying that doesn't mean your job isn't to get better, but it does make it a little bit more of a long play. When you get the number 1 overall pick and you can get a Connor Bedard, that expedites the process. But because they've dropped in the draft lottery, I'm okay with it taking a little bit longer because they've had to make investments a little bit different than the immediate impact guy. Now, it doesn't mean you've got my support, in perpetuity. It just means I'm going to accept smaller steps forward because they haven't had that luck. But you still have to be getting better. And that's why 74 to 80 to 88, 89 to me is what I would say is acceptable. But with a mandatory requirement of making the playoffs, barring some slew of huge injuries, but a mandatory requirement of making the playoffs 1 year from now. But that's why I'm a little bit more accepting. Now, losing in the draft lottery, it doesn't change the goal, but losing in the draft lottery, I think it's realistic to expect it to impact the timeline. So that's why I'm at where I'm at.
I get it. And I still want to see some of these other younger players get a chance to play, but I mean, are they ready? Marco Kasper isn't tearing up the AHL like I'd hoped he would. Is he ready to take the step? I don't know if he is. They got some defensemen that are playing at Grand Rapids that look like maybe they're ready for that opportunity. But how much of an opportunity is going to be there next year when you have all your defensemen coming back, with the exception of Gostisbehere as your only unrestricted free agent?